When did you first realize the enormity of the story of Emmett Till? Did you know when you were growing up, or did you have to leave the place you grew up to really know how much it resonated around the country?
I had never heard the name Emmett Till until I went to college.
Never taught in Mississippi school.
No, let me find this real quick. This is always like, this is a textbook.
That's what happens when books are burned, folks, or banned.
Yeah, like this is a textbook. No, this is like, there's some books that should be burned. I mean, like, when you, like, this is being taught in a, painted, I'm trying to find the phrase. This is being taught in a school in Mississippi history right now. This is not like, this is like, right now, there's someone, I guess, in 8th grade, this will be the right answer on the test. In 1950, this is the only thing in the entire Mississippi history book about Emmett Till. In 1955, J.P. Coleman, Attorney General from Choctaw County, was elected governor in Mississippi's first general election after the Brown v. Board of Education decision. Coleman promised to keep the schools segregated. He proved to be a moderating force during a very difficult time. Oh, just wait. Just after the election, Emmett Till, a young black man from Chicago, allegedly made a pass at a white woman in a rural store. 2 men kidnapped him, beat him, killed him, and threw his body in the Tallahatchie River. The coverage of the trial and acquittal of his accused murderers, who later admitted their guilt in an article in a national magazine, painted a poor picture of Mississippi and its white citizens. That's in
2025.
That's the correct answer on the test today. If you ever wonder sometimes, like, how do people think the things they think they're so different from you? It's that they're literally or fundamentally different realities. I mean, if every, you know, I mean, let it be said that, like, you know, I adored my father. It's his Father's Day. I think there's sort of 2 kinds of sons. You either want to be exactly like your dad or nothing like your dad. I think you know which kind we are. My father was a civil rights attorney. We had a cross burned in our front yard in 1982. I know who did it. I went to elementary school with the daughter of the guy who did it. If my father had been born the Grand Wizard of the Coahoma County Ku Klux Klan, my greatest aspiration in life would have been to be the Grand Wizard of the Coahoma County Ku Klux Klan. And so, like, I just feel very, very lucky that I got sort of born into this. So I just don't want to sound like I have some superior moral authority over any of this. I just got real lucky.
Well, you write
inputs.
No, you write on page 79, the story of Till's death is the story of the rise and rot of a tribe of people of which I am one. So you own this. You own this. I mean, you talk about that tribe because you're indirectly related to this.
Well, I mean,
directly.
Directly related to it. I mean, my farm is 23 miles from the barn. You know, you pull out of our shop, you take a left on the gravel road, you take a right on 61, you take a left on the Marigold to Drew Road, and you're at the barn. I mean, it's that many turns. You know, and then you start thinking about the Drew to Ruleville Road is where the barn sits. The Drew to Ruleville Road was built by a guy named Aaron Forrest. Aaron Forrest was a colonel in his brother's cavalry unit. His brother was Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan and the Confederate general. Nathan Bedford Forrest marched his cavalry in late 1863, early 1864, from Helena to Yazoo City, where they got their ass kicked by an all-black unit from Chicago, which I love. But they marched down the Doherty Bayou, down the Drew to Ruleville Road. And so, I mean, I think if the book has a spiritual soul, it is this idea that in some universe where time doesn't work the same way we think it works, you know, there's a world in which there's still, I keep walking by these houses with whatever those things are called up on top.
Widow's walks.
Yeah, and like, by the way, I mean, you gotta feel that there's some ghost up there walking those things right now. And, you know, in some world where time doesn't work the way we think it works, on the Drew to Ruleville Road, night after night after night after night, Nathan Bedford Forrest horses past J.W. Milam's green and white Chevrolet two-tone pickup truck and with Emmett Till in the back of it, and they're just passing each other night after night after night after night after night, and it feels incumbent upon those of us who inherit the land and inherit the idea of it to try to do something about that doom loop.
I've been fortunate to spend some time with you in Mississippi, and I went to the site where Till was thrown in the river by myself, and haunting it's beyond that. I mean, it's one of these things where you go through a clearing and you come upon the river, and you always associate water with sort of solitude and peace. And in that particular instance, I wanted nothing more than to just get the hell out of there. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling that there was some sort of force that was just pushing me almost into the water. What is that? What is that? What is that almost demonic energy that lives there?
Well, you know, there's that great Toni Morrison line, "The water remembers." You know, they call the black folks who live in the Delta call the Tallahatchie River the singing river, because there's so many bodies. I was at that site one time with Emmett's cousin, his great niece, Sharon Wright from Greenwood, Mississippi, and her uncle was Moses Wright, whose house that Emmett was kidnapped out of. And so we walked up there, and I was like, "What are you thinking about standing here?" And she said, "I'm just so full of joy." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "He got out. He got out of the water." And, you know, what people don't realize is that the state of Mississippi saw that body. And, you know, the reason that we all know the name Emmett Till is this was the O.J. Simpson trial. This was the first trial that was ever on television. And so, you know, in 1953, like 7% of homes had a television, and by 1956, like 87% did. This is right in the heart of that. And this was the first, and so you could see it. I mean, the same thing that made Elvis dangerous made this dangerous. You could see it. And so the state of Mississippi knew, like, this is a real problem. And so they tried to bury him immediately. And they went to the East Money Church of God of Christ. It's on what is now Whaley Road. You can pull it up on your phone. There's a cemetery there. They dug a hole. They had the hearse there with the body in it. The embalmer took great care. His name was Champ Jackson from Tutwiler, Mississippi. If you were ever flying through the Memphis airport and go into the Delta Crown Room or Sky Club or whatever they call it now, Champ Jackson's daughter is one of the women who works up there. She's in there almost every day. I saw her 2 days ago. She's in there all the time. And so, you know, just I mean, I literally, like yesterday, 2 days ago, saw her. And so they had this hole dug, and the Steelworkers Union of Chicago went to war for Emmett Till. The head of the steel union lived on Mamie Street. And when he found out the kid was missing, he just lost his mind. And so he called the mayor of Chicago, who called the governor of Illinois, who called the governor of Mississippi, who called the sheriff of LeFleur County, and they stopped it with about 20 minutes to spare, or we never would have heard the name Emmett Till. And so that's what the family thought of, is he got out of the river and almost no one got out of the river.
That was the small saving grace, which is remarkable. That. Let's go more macro for a second. You really gave a lot of your life to this book. Just the way you described the room in which you wrote it in, and the map of all the counties of Mississippi. Spoke to a mutual friend of ours that said your original draft was north of 200,000 words.
287.
287,000.
And the one in your hand is 107, and I cut it, so I cut a book and a half. Like,
so, but that's almost, it's fanatical. It's obsessive in a great way. Just talk about what that did to your psyche, what it was like carrying that weight for all that time. Because you write about somebody, you live with them to a degree, and they haunt you. Like, talk about doing that. I mean, to that degree.
I'm sort of a nightmare to live with, probably, because the book is a thought experiment that basically says, if manifest destiny is the core of the American identity, there's a world in which the last piece of land settled was the land directly beneath where the barn is. Land is divided up into townships and ranges. It's Township 22 North, Range 4 West. Then Thomas Jefferson in 1785 had the Land Ordinance Act, which it was a really revolutionary idea because it basically turned all of America into government-backed securities. And there were these sort of squares of land that you could buy on a map, never having gone there. And people started buying and trading this land, especially railroad companies. And so by the time of the shootout at the OK Corral, the Mississippi Delta was totally uninhabited. It was uninhabited hardwood swamps, basically until 1900, except on the edges. And so you couldn't get life insurance in the Mississippi Delta until 1900. No one would insure you. And so I didn't realize the degree to which the place I am from is completely man-made. And this land is not supposed to be in large tract plantations. It is supposed to be uninhabited hardwood swamps full of sycamore trees, full of deer, full of hogs, full of black bear, full of ivory-bill woodpeckers. And that is all gone. And so there became this sickening idea that if all of this land is made by man, it's this is what happens when you push God out of a place. There's just this entire thing is a factory that's been built just the same as a steel mill in Youngstown.
And I think that's one of the most masterful things about your book is you talk about the families, of Emmett Till and those who murdered him, and there's this sort of interconnectedness that all comes back to wanting that little piece of land for themselves and in their own way, how they see it.
You can't escape it. I mean, the last living eyewitness to the kidnapping is a guy named the Reverend Wheeler Parker. And he was Emmett Till's cousin, best friend, next door neighbor. He rode the train south with him. The kidnappers pointed the gun in his face first. And he's now an 86-year-old Kojic minister from Chicago. Kojic is the Church of God in Christ. The white version would be the Church of Christ. It's like the black Pentecostal. And he's a Pentecostal minister. And they live in Argo Summit. I don't know if anybody ever uses Argo starch or Cairo syrup. Those are all made at the Argo starch plant in Argo, and they call Argo Little Mississippi. Everybody who works at this plant is from the Mississippi Delta. Emmett Till's uncle was given, Moses Wright, after he had to flee, was given a patch of a garden to farm there by the Illinois Central Railroad. And he farmed it with another old man who was from Louisiana who was living in exile. And so it was Emmett Till's uncle and Fred Hampton's father who were farming together in Argo Summit, Illinois. I mean, these things are so interconnected. But, Reverend Parker is old and he's had health problems. And I was driving him around the Delta one day and I just sort of said, well, what do you think happens when we die? And he said, I've been thinking a lot about that. And he had told me, when I started doing this book, there were 12 people left alive who actually knew Emmett Till, and now they're probably 8. I mean, they're dying in front of me. And he said he'd been going around to all those people asking what they knew about Emmett's spiritual life because, he's very Old Testament, and he needed to know that Emmett was going to be in heaven when he got there because he's the first person he wants to see. And he said, and I hope he thinks I did a good job. There's a storage unit right now in Chicago that Mamie's family has, and they pay for every month. They don't know what to do with, but they don't know what to do because in it is Emmett Till's bicycle and his toy train set.
Something I was curious about is you think about the story of Emmett Till, and as a white man from Mississippi, you have coming from the same place as Elvis, right? There's always this thing that I think folks like you and me who are thinking forward-thinking people, you have this thing in the back of your mind, which is you don't want to appropriate history that might not be yours. But I think what you do a really good job of in the book is saying how the story about Emmett Till is not just a black story. It is not just a white story. It is a uniquely American story, sadly. But how did you thread that needle?
A couple ways. One, the joking answer is very carefully. I mean, the real answer is, I mean, the book, if you look at the book, it doesn't have Emmett Till's name on the cover. I don't know if that was the right decision or the wrong decision, but one, to me, it felt like a story about whiteness in Mississippi. And so that, it also felt like something only someone from there understands. I mean, you know, if you run a farm, you don't control the price of any of your inputs or outputs. You don't control the price of seed. You don't control the price of chemicals. You don't control the price of water. You don't control the weather. On the other end, you don't control the commodity markets. You can't control how much tractors cost. Those are going up constantly. You can't control anything. The only X in the equation of running a farm that you have any control over whatsoever, and this is true today, it was true 500 years ago, is labor. And now you see where it starts. And so in Mississippi, there was no law. I could treat you however I wanted to treat you, and you couldn't, if you were black, you couldn't go to a court. And so it became a test of morals. How do you behave in the shadows when there is no punishment? And almost everyone failed. Not everybody, but almost everyone failed. And I used to think naively that there were good people and bad people. And that just isn't true. They're brave people, most of whom have nothing to lose, and they're cowards. And it's been really interesting to sort of see, you know, everybody in this book, I know their grandchildren, you know. J.W. Milam's grandson, when he was 18 years old and about to go to Ole Miss, they had to sit him down and tell him because he didn't know. And they're like, somebody is going to hear your last name and figure it out. And he had no idea. I mean, we live in a land of deep omerta, and it's getting worse, not better. We have stories that we have infections that need to be exposed to light and air, especially in Mississippi. I'm just talking about that place. And like, we're not close to even having the conversation.
And you go back to what we started about, those ghosts. I mean, it is very unsettled because now, all these years later, you just said backstage that you actually think the National Memorial for it is going to be rescinded for the Emmett Till site. And something that I saw with my own eyes when I was down there, and it pushed me to tears, is the sign that commemorates it has bullet holes in it. People shoot it. Why is that? Why has that sign had to be replaced 3 times? Why did Morgan Freeman basically have to have a bank account set up so that the sign can be perpetually replaced?
And the new one is made out of Kevlar. I mean, the new sign's bulletproof. You can shoot it all you want. And the one that shot up is in the Smithsonian now. Yeah. It is, well, I mean, you could imagine how if you read the story of Emmett Till in your 8th grade history book and that's what you learned, you probably wouldn't give a shit about shooting. And it was like, you know, and it's also like, Mississippi has a real cosplay problem. Like we attract outsiders who want the morality play of Mississippi. You know, Ole Miss has the highest percentage of out-of-state students in the SEC, and like a lot of them are drawn because it's like the anti-woke university. And so like Mississippi, there's a whole current through it of these things being reenacted over and over and over and over. And so, I mean, that monument, so the kids who shot it up were KAs from Ole Miss who were Memphis, Dallas, Texas, and Atlanta. And it's so interesting that like we got enough problems on our own, but like, you know, I mean, I think the Heritage Foundation has hundreds of employees in Mississippi. Everything that happens in the rest of America is beta tested on Mississippi. And so like you might think it doesn't matter, but whatever happens there first will happen to you.
It is Father's Day, so I want to talk a little bit about the man you're named after, Walter Wright Thompson, civil rights attorney, and talk about just the fortitude that he had to not only endure something like a cross burning, but he was, I would venture to guess, a very much a minority in the community that he grew up in.
I mean, immensely. I mean, we were the only, I mean, one of the sort of, after the truly vile ethnic slurs were sort of pushed out of the vocabulary of my hometown, a new one became, when you couldn't say that word anymore, people would say, look at those Democrats. So like we were the, you know, we were the only white Democrats I knew.
Yeah, and just a quick sidebar on that. When I went down and visited you in 2016, and this was in September of 2016, you told me right then, you said Trump's going to win. How'd you know that?
It was, I mean...
Because we certainly felt the pull when we were at that tailgate, but how did you just knew it? I mean, you said it to me with 100% certitude, and I was coming back at you with polls, and I'm like looking up Hillary Clinton's numbers in swing states, and I'm like, no, you're completely you're so brainwashed by Mississippi. Like, I know politics, I know what I'm talking about. I was completely wrong. How did you know that? You felt the pulse of the country in a way that everybody else missed.
It was in the bloodstream, man. It was everywhere.
Not just in Mississippi.
No, but it was the way, you know, I drove from New York City to Cooperstown. I saw more Confederate flags on that road than I see in the Mississippi Delta. And it was just like, I was like, there's something going on. And, you know, I was researching this book so you talk about crazy conspiracy theories. This was the defense's theory of the case. They told the jury, and the jury believed, that the NAACP had gotten a body out of a morgue in either Chicago or Detroit and beat it, weighted it down with a gin fan, thrown it in the Tallahatchie River so that it was heavy enough that it would sink, but that it was light enough that it would come back to the surface and be discovered, and that Emmett Till was a real person, but he was being hidden by the NAACP, and that Mamie Till had been paid off with life insurance to come in and lie about the fact that that body was her own son, and that all of the sharecropper witnesses to the murder were all like Manchurian plants by the Communist Party to tear down Mississippi, which was the first line of defense for the American ideal.
Which this reads like what Twitter is like today, by the way.
No, that's exactly right, and they bought that. When the FBI tried to reopen the case, they had to exhume Emmett Till's body because one of the things they were going to have to prove at trial is that this was Emmett Till that was buried there, because the jury verdict said that. By the way, of course it was, and so the erasure of this that's about to happen again. When the FBI got to the courthouse in Tallahatchie County to reopen the case, the file was there, but it was empty. There were no transcripts, there was nothing. They had to find a transcript of the trial in private hands, or else the whole thing would have been over. If you go in the Ole Miss Library right now, you can find the famous 1956 Look magazine story that has the confession in it. The magazine is there in the library, but the story is torn out. If you go to the Delta State University Library right now, they have the 1956 Look magazine, but the story is torn out. The erasure is almost complete, and people fought tooth and nail for the last 20 years to put up the Emmett and Mamie Till National Memorial. It was dedicated 18 months ago, and I bet it doesn't see New Year's.
Remarkable. It's part of the amount of work you put into this book, because I think you really do have a bulletproof case in terms of all the research you did. Does that come from your dad and how he was a lawyer?
You know, I think the perfect combination of a journalist is my mother was a high school English and creative writing teacher, and my father was a trial lawyer. You know, I like to read and then argue about it. I had to get off of Twitter because my boss called on a Monday morning, and I blearily answered the phone, and he said, "Did you threaten to kill someone on Twitter?" And I was like, yes, I did. And he was like, "Why?" And I told him, he goes, "Well, that makes sense, but you just can't do that." I think I said something terrible like, "We own half of Bolivar County. Good luck finding the body." But no, like, jokes aside, like, my father did professional political fundraising And one of the guys that he raised money for was Joe Kennedy III. And so when I was a kid, we would come up here, like they would have meetings and stuff. And I remember we came to Nantucket one time after one of those meetings, and like I just feel like I had a very palpable sense this morning that that I don't want to sound stupid, but that my dad was aware, because he grew up in Bentonia, Mississippi, very, very poor. His father, just incredibly racist. My dad's brother was going out making field recordings of blues musicians who lived in their hometown in Bentonia, and which has its own style of blues. Like Skip James is from there, and a bunch of people. And then when my granddad found the tapes that my uncle had been making, he burned them. And so like my dad escaped the gravitational pull of that, and like had this sort of aspirational idea of himself and his family, and he loved coming here. We stayed at, is there the pink elephant, something elephant? White elephant?
White elephant.
We stayed there. We had a cottage. It was magic. I just like remember thinking how happy he was, because he loved Mississippi, but he was happiest when he felt far away from it. And so I just, like, today being here, I really like remembered how light he felt here. Anyway, like I just had those really powerful memories of being 12 years old here.
You, in your house in Oxford, you go down to the basement, you have your dad's shoe shine kit up on the wall.
Shit, I forget you've been in my house. That's totally unfair.
And it goes with the quote, "When your work speaks for itself, don't interrupt." What's that mean?
Well, I mean, look, I've inherited my father's crippling need for attention. It is, but he loved to shine shoes. He was in the Army, and he just loved the idea of a perfectly shined pair of shoes. And so, like, when my mom would go out of town, he would always be, like, one time she went out of town, and we went to the grocery store, and he bought 3 or 4 dozen eggs, and we came home, and he taught me every single way you could make an egg. He's like, man needs to know how to cook an egg. And so I still can. I mean, like all of it, from omelets to hard scrambled. And then, one weekend we had shoe shine lessons. One we'd go clean dove. One we'd go clean fish. He was like, there's just stuff you need to know how to do, boy. And so, but I have Sonia, my wife, got me his shoe shine kit one year for Father's Day from my mom, and it's framed in a shadow box. And it's almost like the Notre Dame Play Like a Champion today, because it's on the stairs that lead down to my car, and it's like the last thing out. And then he had a needlepoint in his office that said, if your work speaks for itself, don't interrupt it. And so I think about that a lot. I mean, it's so weird to be here with my girls who, like, I wrote a story one time about Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan, his staff was making fun of the fact that he has this huge Gulfstream, and the Nike shoe designers painted it. It's incredible. You can't, I mean, it's like, your shiny white one looks silly next to Michael Jordan's one that looks like a pair of sneakers. And so his staff wouldn't ride with him on the plane when they were flying to Europe. They would fly commercial because Michael insisted on watching Westerns, because he would watch them at full blast, like old ones, like, A Mule for Sister Sally, and like, like tie a ribbon around, all the old ones. And it turned out that his favorite thing to do with his father was watch Westerns. And that's how he felt close to him. And if you go to his house right now, every night before Michael Jordan goes to sleep, he puts on his television the Western Channel. And he still misses his father to the degree that he helps him go to sleep every night. And I feel that less than I used to, and I'll go long stretches of time without thinking about it, but when it comes back like a hurricane.
And I've stole that story about Michael Jordan when I was on my book tour. And I would always point to it that Michael Jordan, who we put up on the apotheosis of the hardened, toughest male athlete there ever was, the consummate killer perfectionist, is a very vulnerable male who misses dad so much every night.
It's like that great Dan Jenkins. Dan Jenkins has the stages of drunkenness. And like, you know, I think 5 is patriotic, 6 is crank up the Enola Gay, and 7 is crying about your daddy drunk. And like that is real. I think 8 is invisible, 9 is clairvoyant.
You said to me one time that nostalgia can kill you, but I think we have this problem where we can't necessarily seem to leave it. And you wrote when Wallace was born about how you had this immense desire to look forward, that now you were a dad, forward thinking. This is a new generation. I have a chance to, as Bruce Springsteen says, let someone's sins be their own. Do not bring forward any generational traumas or whatnot. So it was very forward thinking. But then you brought your dad's hat and shirt to the hospital.
I'm just like, it's so pathetic. It's so pathetic when you say it out loud, but like, there's nostalgia comes from the Greek words for home and pain. And that's always been tremendously moving to me. And, Pappy, all these books really are at their core about inheritance and like, what do we pass on and what do we want to die with us? And, there are many parts of my father I would like to pass on, and there are many that I've clearly inherited that I would like to die with me. It felt important that, there's a great, like that, I think it's the Nietzsche thing that like words, like ideas when given words acquire power they didn't previously have. I just sometimes think that they're physical talismans that are required for someone to be present. I didn't give a shit about them being in the room. Sorry, girls. It was the act of going to find them for me that made me sort of stop and think. Like, I could be deeply nostalgic. By the way, the best thing about the South is nostalgia, and the worst thing about the South is nostalgia.
That's where your advice came to me from, right? It's this push and pull, right?
It's both. It's the book that changed my life was by a writer named Willie Morris. It's called North Toward Home. And Willie Morris was the youngest ever editor of Harper's. He hired David Halberstam away from the New York Times, and just was, brilliant at what I guess we would call new journalism, long-form literary journalism. And that book was the first time I realized you could both love Mississippi and hate it. Because, like, especially if you live there and you only love it, something's wrong with you. And if you live there and you only hate it, something's wrong with you. There's a great Eudora Welty line. She did an interview, and she was on a talk show. And somebody said, well, why do you live in Jackson, Mississippi? And she just looked at this interviewer, sort of, her voice dripping with passive-aggressive disdain, and said, because it's home. And, you don't choose your home. I think we are deeply tribal people who in many cases have been ejected out into the great American, or for some people, global wilderness trying to find a home. And I think we all have these callings. But the people who are from this island feel about it in a way that if you've lived here for 60 years, you wouldn't. I bet that you're walking the same streets. I bet you're going to the same shops. I bet you're paying the same taxes. I bet you're eating the same scallops, which are pretty incredible. Look, I'm a sucker, man. I don't know what the Wharf Rat Club is, but I want to join it.
I told him it's impossible, but you might get a whiskey. If you bring Poppy Van Winkle whiskey,
let me just tell you, I got the greatest duck and deer hunting in the Mississippi Delta, so somebody wants to horse trade with me later, I'm your guy. We'll murder. I'll have you limit out in 11 minutes, and we'll be back drinking whiskey. But like, they're fundamentally different places. And I just think that, like, for me, I feel happiest. And ultimately, I think my father, who tried to get away over and over and over again, felt happiest in his dirt, in my dirt. I love taking the girls to our farm because it's going to be theirs. There's a world in which all that book is an instruction manual for those two girls about how to own that land.
That was my Next question, which is obviously you wrote this for history. I think you wrote this certainly for the Till family. I think you wrote this, obviously, you write things for yourself. You wrote this for yourself. But to me, it's almost this everlasting encapsulation of girls, this is where you're from, the good, the bad, the very, very, very ugly. Do with it what you will, but know about it.
That was, I mean, you want to sell as many books as you can, but it definitely had an audience of two. And, you know, this is where you're from. And it is a sign of strength, not weakness, to know it. It is a sign of mental agility, maturity, and sophistication to interrogate it and to love it, to hate it and to make it better. And I just think that anything other than that is, you're almost cosplaying your own life.
I know that Wallace saw Harvard University a few days ago. I don't know if 7-year-olds are going to Harvard yet, but she had said to her mom, "Oh, I want to go here. I could go here. If they left Mississippi, would you be okay with that? Could you handle that?"
Dude, they could go wherever they want. I just got to warn them, though, wherever they go to college, we're buying a condo. I talk about it all the time. I mean, and like, I don't want my thing to be their thing. And like, I would be happy for them to sell this farm and sell all our stuff and move away and never look back. I want them to have the decision, and I want them to have all of the facts for the decision. But like, I'm not one of those people who like is trying to like control them from beyond the grave. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, my mom would never sell our farm at any profit. But I don't, there's that great Bruce Springsteen thing from the Broadway show where he says you can either be, and this is probably perfect for Father's Day, you can either be an ancestor to your children or a ghost. You can either wrap your stuff so tightly around their ankles that it pulls them back down with you, or you can push them up to everything that you wanted for yourself or didn't want for yourself, but to whatever they want. And so like that Springsteen Broadway show, like that really moved me.
It's a beautiful piece of art that everyone could watch. All right, I'll get you out of here with this one. These are trying times, and it's an understatement. But it feels as though regression is real, and it feels that the pendulum swing backwards is incredibly forceful. But one of the things that I think you've done in this book is you've very much painted a picture of how difficult things used to be. And I was fortunate when I covered Congress to get to know John Lewis a little bit. And John Lewis was always the first person to say, trust me, it is better today than it was back then. I promise you with every ounce of my being, the future is better than the past. How do you maintain a sense of hope and optimism now when you see this erasure, when you see Mississippi being almost the place that attracts people who want to go be regressive in a sense? How do you maintain that hope and optimism?
Well, I think there are two things. I mean, I think one, you just have to, because I don't really know what the alternative is for us to all to just leave. And I don't want to do that. I'm going to stand and fight. I think the other thing is that we've been through this before, caused by almost the same things. I mean, Joe Rogan is Father Coughlin. I mean, we've done this. We've already done this. We already know the playbook. We know what the next, the part that scares me is the modern Klan was formed in like 1923, and the March on Washington was 1963. So that's 40 years. So what's 40 years from today? Yeah, we're not going to see us get our country back. None of us. No one in this room will see it be like it was in 2008. But this is a 40-year fight. And like, it's almost 1954 again. We got to go convince, it's actually 48 again. We got to go convince people why it's good to integrate the military. I mean, we have to go back to Harry Truman and start over.
It's a long, long road. All right,
Happy Father's Day, everybody.
Hey! Do we have time for a few Q&A?
Yeah. Is there a bar on this island?
Okay. Well, there is the brewery send-off at 3 p.m. that everyone's invited to, so we want to get out there quickly. I wanted to do 2 quick questions for the audience. I'd like to get the audience involved. Anybody? We don't have an extra mic, so you...
Not good ear.
All right, you got one here.
Got you.
Yeah.
What has the response been to your book in Mississippi?
What's the response been to the book in Mississippi?
The response in Mississippi has been overwhelmingly positive, even from like family members I thought would be very upset. I mean, it's sort of, one, I think the love comes through. 2, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Mississippi Delta, people from there, we just want to be the center of the universe, whether it's good or bad. But like, jokes aside, like, I think people know that it's true. And 2 different people have reached out to me since the book came out to place 2 other people at the murder. There is a there are people, like, this is not, there's secrets. You know, it's those Russian nesting dolls. And we're nowhere near to the smallest doll yet.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Have you had any success in approaching the subject of racism with somebody who doesn't want to talk about it? And if so, how did you do it?
Did you guys hear that? Have you had any success approaching the topic of racism, and how do you do so if someone does not want to do it?
No, I think in the way that like the most effective recruiters of sort of the Christian religion aren't people who preach at you or tell you you're going to go to hell or tell you, you know, here's what the Bible says. They're people who live their lives in such a way that other people notice eventually and then say, I want some of what they got. You know, I have 2 uncles. I have one of them who is a total hypocrite who loves to use Jesus as a sword, who's always, you know, he's just one of those guys. I have another one who is a man of, he's since passed, but was a man of towering faith, but also incredible humility, curiosity. I mean, he had a very strict religion for himself, but never once, I mean, I knew him as well as you could know a human being, never once tried to push it on me. He just lived his life in such a way that made me think, well, there's something to whatever he's got. So I guess what I would say is that if you were going to try to convince someone not to be a racist, the very worst thing you could do is call them a racist. Because at that point, that conversation is over and there's nowhere to go. I mean, I think I think you got to find a common postage stamp. Like, here's the thing we agree on. It can be as simple as, I don't care if you're racist. I don't care if you're homophobic. I don't care if you are, I don't care what you think about the death penalty. I don't care what you think about abortion. You have to believe that the rule of law matters and that the president has to follow what a federal judge says. If we can agree on that, then we can disagree on everything else. And I'm going to try to live my life in such a way to sort of start to get you back on the other stuff.
And you have on your... Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, followed by, I don't know.
And you know, Wright...
Where's the bar, you know?
Wright lives that gospel on his souped-up, badass Mississippi pickup truck. He has a bumper sticker that says, "The Episcopal Church welcomes you." So...
I do.
Thank you so much for coming out today on Father's Day. We appreciate it. Wright will be signing in the back. Generational talent, so get your book signed. And then the party at Cisco Brewery, 3 p.m. The beer is still cold, so come on and have a few to toast all the wonderful authors. And thank you to the Book Festival and Mary Haft and Kaylee for all the hard work they've done. A wonderful, wonderful time this year.